Oh, yeah. What was her name? Gina or something?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Behringer with you today. Hey, today we're going to talk about a really important topic that I don't think we've covered up until this episode, and that's mindfulness, right? And that kind of mental hygiene that needs to take place. And so I went out and got the expert, here in San Antonio, Melissa Aguirre, who has worked so much, for the past decade. We were just talking with warfighters in this topic. So, Melissa, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is something that you talk about the past decade. Most of it has been volunteer because this is kind of one of those squishy topics that people can easily dismiss and overlook the relevance and importance of it.
Yeah, no, and that was why, like me, for instance. So I think we've done like 30 episodes, and this is the first time we're really, actually, Colonel Mike Story talked a little bit about mindfulness. Okay, so I can't leave him. I apologize. He did his research. To be fair, he did his research on that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you're living, breathing, doing this stuff every day. So the fact that it took over 30 episodes to make this happen. That's a ding on me, and just shows that, people need to think more about it. But one of the things I wanted to touch on, because I know this is very personal for you, is how you got working with the military and what kind of drives you to help warfighters out in mindfulness.
Yeah, so actually it goes all the way back. My husband and I are high school sweethearts. And when he was joining the military, I was like, what am I going to do with my life, right? Like, where is this going to go? So I ended up, while he joined, went to college, and while he was deployed to Afghanistan, I went to my first 200-hour yoga teacher training. And part of that was because somebody had showed me an article about the benefits of yoga for post-combat, post-traumatic stress, and all of that stuff. So I took an interest of, like, when I read that article, I was like, that's what I want to do, is I want to bring yoga to the military. I want to serve and also be equipped to support my husband in his career. And so once he came back from deployment, I officially moved to Fort Bragg. There was like one yoga studio, and I just went for it. I worked for the MWR and the Warrior Transition Battalion, and I was leading yoga. And I started fulfilling unit requests on Fort Bragg for PT. So that's kind of where it started. And then I developed a program that I partnered with the Wounded Warrior Project. That was when I really got to see the efficacy of this stuff, because these people were coming in, and some of them were still in, or they were getting med boarded out, but bringing mindfulness and the education, because that was within the program. It wasn't just, hey, we're going to do a yoga class. It was, well, why are we doing these things? What is the benefit? And then also working with their family members. And I will never forget, and it was probably one of the most emotional moments of my career, was sitting with, he had just gotten out of the military, and he told me that the VA told him he was broken. And how by going through the program, it was for the first time, because we were doing different mindfulness techniques for sleep, and then of course the regular yoga classes, and equipping them with ways to bring it into their life. He had said for the first time, like, he was sleeping and he was seeing that he wasn't broken. And after being told, I think there's so many people who maybe have had a physical injury or navigating mental challenges, and whether it's the system that tells you you're broken, or you feel, especially for athletes, right? If you get injured and you can't do what you used to do, that can lead down to a cascade of mental health challenges. And realizing that there's hope, and it's not something necessarily external, but that we have these capabilities and this inner resource within, it's so empowering. And it also shifts people to begin to participate in their healthcare alliance versus being kind of in a victim state of just being passed and recycled, but saying, wait a second, I can do these techniques, I can do these things, I could practice reframe, and all of the means of mental performance and mindfulness in general. Yoga is really how we get to the mind, but we also can do this in physical training. But it's so empowering. And after working with the Wounded Warrior Project for a few years and delivering that program, we ended up getting stationed at Fort Sam. So it was really hard as a military spouse leaving Fayetteville. That community, I'll forever hold it in my heart, because I had done so much work there. So starting from scratch here was really intimidating. And just very briefly, I ended up kind of shifting more into civilian sector, opened some yoga studios in San Antonio, had our training programs for the civilian side, and then I ended up doing a partnership with the USO in 2018. The USO had a primary focus on military spouses because they had just done a study to show that military spouses struggle with three things mostly, and that is community, career, and self-identity. And reading about the study as a military spouse, I saw myself in that in a lot of ways, and I mastermind with them to develop a program to support military spouses. But part of the program was how do we bring them together to foster community? And that's when we opened Mill Mind Body in 2019, which was the first yoga studio to ever open on a military base. And that was really big with our programming. And then we just had an open schedule so personnel and families could come in and receive services. And it was fueled by my business. So I have my schools and the civilian side. All of that was what funded our ability to bring that here to Fort Sam. Unfortunately, the pandemic closed that down, but things then took a different direction to where I am now with developing more mindfulness programs for the U.S. Army, advising, being an H2F subject matter expert. And so my mission continues on.
No, that's awesome. And Melissa, I love it. Like, you hit on so many things in terms of, being told you're broken, and when your identity is a soldier, like dealing with that and coming to terms with that, the identity struggles with the military spouse, because you're so connected to the Army, but you're not in the Army per se. Even though we talked about it, you're still serving, you're still playing a crucial role in that service member's career and how they progress. And then I just love the fact that, like, I didn't even realize this till now, is like you're using your resources you're making in the private sector to fund that, to help service members even more. So all that is awesome. Is there any potential for that the Mill Mind Body to come back to the force? Or
well, in order to bring something like that onto a military base, you have to have an MOU, you have to have partnerships. And what I learned is there's an access barrier when you have something in a physical space. Having physical things is of relevance. We know this post-pandemic. We need to be together. We need community. But the challenge of getting people there, we found that it was mostly a lot of the personnel, and weren't really able to get a lot of the family members. But our online program was really, really successful. And to this day, we still serve so many military spouses through our free foundations course. I don't know if I'll be bringing another yoga studio on base, mostly because manning that, and funding that. I think that where the Army is going is really, really exciting because, like you said, service members come home to their families. And what they bring home, or, as silly as, like, you're at breakfast and then all of a sudden, your partner needs to leave so they can go do a pee test to make sure, like, they don't test positive. Or, like, the random disruptions that happen, like, that is something that spouses do carry. However, as much as I believe in optimizing the spouse, I think that when we nourish and care for our soldiers, they are better, they find coherence easier. And, we overuse the word resilience, but really it's how we regulate. And they're able to process and regulate the stresses and can come home with more support and compassion and understanding. And I think that brings more coherence to the marriage, to the partnerships, to the child-parent relationship. So I find a deep interest in serving spouses, but especially service members, because a lot of the challenges actually start there. And that's what I learned from my work with the Wounded Warrior Project is, a lot of spouses become the caregiver, at some point in the journey, especially if there's injuries or even just the process of a soldier getting out of the military, right? That transition can come with a lot of different challenges and fear. And if we prepare our soldiers so we're leaving them better than we found them, and we truly mean that, and we invest our time, energy, and resources into ensuring that soldiers are, like, when they get out, they're better than when they came in, then that's only going to help the families even more.
No, I mean, and society, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many things about the health of that family, unit. I mean, for for just being good people, we need that to occur. But then like knowing that the healthier that family unit is, the better the marriage, the better, that all that goes, that's going to affect the way people work. That's going to affect, that is going to affect performance. That is a performance issue. Because as we were talking before, we came on air, it's like the military lifestyle, you can't really compartmentalize that. I mean, you can try, but it's not like it's going to bleed over into everything that occurs within that family. So I love your, kind of term, it's more about not necessarily resilience is a component, but like regulating those stressors.
Well, and having open conversations. I mean, communication is really what builds relationship and trust. And when we're able to regulate and reflect, because a lot of this is our own personal inquiry of, I'm struggling with this, or I know this about my boundaries, or just knowing ourselves, right? Like, it's that Art of War quote that, like, when you know yourself, you win all battles. And in that, we can have real, honest conversations. And I think about the challenges we've navigated as a military family, that even having open dialogue and being able to feel safe enough in that open dialogue so we can negotiate as a family versus anybody feeling, and even my kid, right? Like, this is her childhood. This is her experience. This is going to inform how she evolves into an adult. And if we are always in a space of just suck it up, this is the way it is, or there's no room for your feelings here, then that tells her that it's not safe for her to share how she feels. And so all of this stuff teaches us also how to be in relationship and then have empathy and really listen and not take it on as something personal, but take it on as an opportunity for us to connect deeper.
Yeah, no, I mean, wow, that hits home, and especially because, from the military side of it, we've kind of been trained for the past years. It's like the exact opposite. Like you said, you nailed it. Like the suck it up. Like we don't talk about feelings. Yeah. What are feelings? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so you have that throughout your career, and yeah, that does. I've been guilty of that as a parent. That does bleed over into maybe your kids, and if you don't realize it, that hey, they need to be able to feel safe to express their emotions. So, I mean, how do what are the steps that folks can take to getting there, or what's the first,
So I look at this is emotional hygiene, right?
Okay.
And it's part of mental hygiene, where we're able to, like, when I think about our ability to express our feelings, part of the reason we struggle with, if someone brought, like, if your soldier came to you with a problem, right? Or your child's upset and saying, saying something that makes you feel ashamed almost of, like, I can't be there, or your spouse says something. Usually our resistance to that is not because of them, but because we don't know how to deal with our own feelings. We don't know how to deal with the thoughts and the energy that comes with that. And when we are programmed and in a system of, avoid or bypass, this creates reactivity. So this leads to a lot of the mindfulness stuff. So if we're not aware of why we do what we do, everything we do is pure impulse. If you think about that, it's like, if we're not aware of why we do what we do, then we're just reacting and we're in impulse, which reaction is really the opposite of responding. It's like, we're just going to react. But if I take in the information and I'm aware of the experience I'm having with this, and then I respond with emotional intelligence to it, then we can have better actions and choices. So I want to talk a little bit about the human weapon system, since that's like a common topic in human performance. And I don't think we spend enough time breaking down what this is, because this is, when we break it down, then we can really understand how we get to those places. So if you look at the mechanics of a machine, right? You have the actual machine, which can represent the body of a human. You have the energy, or like the electricity moving through the machine, which represents our energy, right? We got to remember, as humans, we're molecular. Mm-hmm. So inside molecules is electrons, protons, neutrons, which have a resonance. So whether we're feeling energized or the ATP in our cells are effective, whatever it is, right? We can go so many different directions to understand energy. But our own vitality is an important aspect. And then with the machine, something we don't talk about is there's always a program to the machine, like telling the machine how to operate. And within ourselves, we have a program. We have neural patterns. We have thought forms that are like consistent thought forms and dialogue in our mind. So being aware of what are my beliefs, what are the programs, what are the impressions that I have in myself of why I do what I do or what I'm supposed to do or the expectations I put on myself. Being aware of how I feel, the energy. And then is the body effective and healthy and working optimally? It's in human performance, we'll spend a lot of time looking at just the body. All right, we're going to train.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the shadows that come with that is disembodiment, right? Where people end up doing the workouts, and they're getting through it. We're just doing it to get it done, right? We're doing it just to get through it versus really being present with what we're experiencing in the training. When we build self-awareness, because the benefit of working out in general, or PT or drills or training, is to build patterns. In the military we call it movement lethality, right? So we're building these neural patterns so it becomes our default. But if we're just rushing through things and we're not bringing self-awareness to it, most people will disassociate when they work out. And this is where we miss so much opportunity to train the nervous system for that resilience that affects our families, that affects our career and our life and our choices. So if you think about the human weapon system, the ways to optimize it is that through physical training, can we bring self-awareness so we're aware of the thoughts that are coming to our mind? Are we aware of our stress control and the energy in our body? And when we infuse those components into training, you don't even have to tell someone to feel better. You don't even have to tell someone they need to figure out how to regulate. Like, those are natural byproducts of the system, of the nervous system, of the human weapon system. And that's really my mission, is how do we bring education and train effective human performance optimization through these different traits that are already accessible within us. We're just not exercising those aspects.
So what would that look at? So using the example of a workout,
Yeah.
what might that look at? Because I again, it's like you're talking to me. No, yeah. I mean, some of the things I know I disassociate in terms of when I do something hard, because I'll give an example, like a ruck march. I'm carrying a heavy ruck.
Yeah.
My body is moving, my mind's somewhere else. I'm gone. I'll sometimes check out mentally, and I'm just like one foot in front of the other. I'm on autopilot, and I'm off doing something else in my mind. So that's not a good practice, right? So how do you get to the point to where you're doing that?
Well, one thing is, are we preparing for, how do we prepare for ruck marches? So even before, what are we doing to warm up the body? Usually there might be some mobility training or stretching, but in that, are we using our breath and then building breath literacy? So while we're rucking, are you noticing, I stopped breathing? And just feeling what it feels like to take a big breath in. And I even invite, if you're listening to this, just take a big breath in and sigh it out and notice how you feel. I mean, it literally refreshes the body. And then with the mind, so in 7-22, it talks about performance imagery. And I came up with this idea of performance statements. What are the statements and thoughts in the mind to affirm that I am valid, I am good enough, or I am, I'm aware, whatever the intention is. Are we just being present with it? Because there's going to be sometimes in physical exertion, you're going to have to just get through it.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about a combat experience, there are going to be, you're not going to be, if you're in the middle of a firefight and you're rushing to carry someone to a helicopter, you're probably not going to be in this reflective state. You're going to get them to the helicopter. So from a practical standpoint, we want to make sure, though, that once after something happens or after the ruck march, are you able to regulate back to coherence, or are you still in a sympathetic state? Are you wearing the body so much where you're not giving it a chance to recover? So I would say it's actually, in some cases, the ruck march matters, in itself, but how we prepare for that and then how we recover after is really where all those benefits come in.
Okay. So when we're preparing for it, what sort of practices or things do you recommend?
Yeah. So I think that it's up to, if someone's guiding it or you're self-directing it within yourself, are you aware of your body? So when you grab the weights, I'm really not into weight training, so if I use wrong terms, that's not my specialty. But let's just say you pick up the weights, and are you just picking them up just to move through the motions, or do you feel your feet anchored on the ground? Are you engaging the core? Do you do just a somatic check-in? Hey, what's going on in my body? And then as you feel the grip, are you paying attention to how that feels? Can you use your breath? When you use your breath, is that initiating the movement? And then when you're finished, do you take a moment just to pause, notice your body down-regulating? So some people might feel like that can slow it down, but it actually will you'll be probably more effective in your reps. You'll be more effective in your training. And also including in that rest periods are not just in between workouts where we're panting and waiting for the timer to go for us to start again. Rest periods or recovery is where you find a position that's relaxing for the nervous system. Examples of that would be a forward fold. So anytime you take your head below your heart, you lower your blood pressure. It downregulates the nervous system. So a forward fold is really great, whether it's a wide-legged forward fold. In yoga, we call it child's pose. It could also be you just laying on your back for a few moments, just allowing your nervous system to regulate. So those are just examples. So that body awareness, and then, of course, awareness of how we use our breath, because the breath is our life force. It's going to be where we exert, preserve, and regulate our nervous system. So how are we using that? So those are the two big things, is recovery and the breath, and then the self-awareness of like the proprioceptive awareness that we're experiencing in the training.
No, I like that. Especially the forward fold. I never even thought about that whenever we're getting the head below the heart for the recovery. In terms of the yoga piece and how that was incorporated, how do you see that like fitting in? I mean, is that a component of physical training, or is that a separate entity? Is that something like how have you been working it in, or you've seen it being kind of programmed in the units that practice it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think one thing that with the military, and whether it's culture or just optimizing what we're doing, if we're adding a bunch of new things, I think that can get lost. So it's not necessarily about adding yoga to the schedule. Of course, that can be really great to complement. We know that with our work with 232, for example, that adding yoga for rehabilitation has efficacy. But if we are bringing the traits of yoga, so in research, one of the challenges with studying yoga is that there's so many variables. That, like, if you think about all the styles out there and all, if I say yoga, maybe the first thought that comes to people's mind is someone who looks like a pretzel or like a white woman or whatever. Like, there's these cultural impressions of what that is that I think alone will create access barriers. But if we are looking at all these variables, it's hard to research something that's so dynamic. So what they do is they look at the traits. What are consistent traits in yoga? And that is breath, self-awareness, or they call it also welcoming presence, where we just notice how we feel, relaxation, and movement. So if we apply those traits to physical training in general, so like what I just said, adding more breath awareness and guiding soldiers with their breath by giving them guidance to, hey, check in, notice, let's do self-inventory. Take a moment for self-inventory. And this is whether it's drill sergeants or whoever's training. Take a moment for self-inventory, and we do these pauses in laying down a forward fold, whatever, check in for self-inventory. And then you have the recovery at the end, right, that relaxation. So maybe like in yoga, we have shavasana at the end, so relaxation pose. So doing something where we're just going to relax and down-regulate, take a few moments, and then we're going to go to chow. Then we're going to go to the next thing. And then, of course, movement's movement. If you look at all the styles of yoga, and then with my work within the tactical industry and seeing fitness, like a lot of it, we're calling it mobility, but I mean, really, it's yoga. Like a lot of the things we're already doing is yoga. But if you really want the benefits that, research has shown, it's important that we add these traits. So how can we add some of these traits to what we're already doing?
So with that, so we're adding it, you have the mobility piece of it. How often, like what's the dose? Does it vary, or is there kind of a baseline prescriptive dose? You should be doing this for X amount of time, this many days per week.
So they have found in that if you do a 60-minute dose of it, so to speak, versus like 5 minutes all throughout your day randomly, it's the same benefits. So I don't think, this is why like the cultural aspect of, hey, we can take a few moments, like if you're sitting at your desk and your back starts to ache, for you just to take a few moments to do the spinal movements, or just take a few breaths to stand up and press on your low back, get a back bend. That stuff counts. And so there's an aspect in the civilian world. So I own Mel Murray Yoga, and one of our missions is to teach people how to live like they practice. So how we take these techniques and bring it into our day-to-day, that if you're a mom sitting in car rider line, you can do different tapping or breathing practices to help with regulation. You don't necessarily need that 60-minute time, but I would say that if you're doing just a little bit every day, you're going to see benefits. And what's so cool about this work and going this way is most of these benefits are just a byproduct. So let's if we kind of look at spiritual hygiene, for example, like someone feeling connected to meaning and purpose in life. You know, if you're a leader and your soldier comes to you with an issue with that, or let's say your spouse comes to you with an issue with that, whoever, and you're like, well, life is worth living. Life is good. You have a great family. You should be happy. Look how blessed you are. All of us know that that's not as effective, like just telling people to feel better. It doesn't work. And that's because our mind is so influenced by the body, because the body leads and the mind follows. So if my nervous system is hyper-aroused, and then what that causes is my executive functioning in my brain to be dampened or offline, you telling me there's a bigger picture, that doesn't change anything for me. I can't see that. But when we train with these skills, we know that, well, this stuff can help thicken the prefrontal cortex. It affects amygdala activity in the brain. It will change the nervous system. So that soldier or that person will automatically, in time, probably after 3 weeks to a month, I've seen this so many times again and again, just after a few weeks of doing this, that starts to change. I never had to tell you to feel better. All of a sudden, you just start perceiving and reframing, and those aspects of your brain are now optimized so you can connect with that yourself. And that's why, like in the civilian world, I think, especially with yoga, there's this connection of spirituality, right? Like people will connect it there. And that's because when you look at spiritual hygiene is just how we get through hard times. If you really make it simple, it's what you do to get through hard times. Well, people start to feel that they can handle hard times differently. They're regulating, they're reframing. And you never had to tell them, we just changed these things about your nervous system. We exercised it in ways that our culture just does not normalize. So that's one of the benefits, right?
No, I mean, again, you nailed some stuff that really I'm kind of digesting and thinking about, is like with the regulation and the importance of practicing that. It makes clear sense when you gave your example of somebody struggling with something, and we're telling them to get better. Is like, if that individual is not practicing regulating when things are good, and then all of a sudden we're expecting them to regulate when things are bad. That doesn't make sense, right? Like that. I'm thinking like working out. Like, I don't train you and I just put the weight on the bar and I say, hey, lift harder, but they've never lifted weights. So I kind of see it as that. So no, that light bulb definitely went off for me. Maybe I'm just a little slow, but I never looked at it that way. In terms of, that's kind of the importance of these little practices. And I think the, making it, it's how you painted it, it's so much more accessible when we look at it in those little chunks of time versus, okay, I gotta block off 60 minutes of my day. I'm looking at my calendar. Where do I do that to do this sort of regulation training or mindfulness or yoga or whatever? But if I'm like, hey, I have this 10-minute block here, I have this 5-minute block here, knowing that I'm going to get the same benefits of kind of spreading it out.
Well, and I think there's just an education gap, right? Because also this stuff can seem unproductive or not productive, but when you look at really high functioning people, that like this does not mean hardship doesn't happen in your life. And that's something that I think if we reconcile that it's not about stopping challenge, because you're not. We live in a dualistic world. Like there's love, there's hate. Like we live in duality. And if we can reconcile that it's not about just that if I do this stuff, I'll always feel better, it's going to protect me from hardship, but it's that we're preparing the nervous system that life is going to happen and I'm able to be present and then negotiate, work with my tools, use it for things as they come. And I think a lot of people who struggle with all this anxiety of what's going to happen in the future, my career, like all this forward stuff, or people who are holding on to all this past stuff, these practices train our brain, disrupt those negative feedback loops to be present, like to be here and reclaim our lives in a way. And this is stuff that it's not necessarily communicated. So what's cool is you don't have to sell this. It's just that you thread it into training, you thread it into workouts, and people they're more present with their kids. They're more present with their spouse. They're able to take care of tasks way quicker and efficiently because the body's just optimized.
No, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. So again, from the practical standpoint, for folks listening, where do they start? Like, what do you recommend? Like for the person who's not doing any of this, that's listening to this, is like, hey, everything Melissa says sounds really good. They're nodding their head. They're like, where do I get started?
There's a lot of ways. I mean, for those who are in the military, we have yoga classes on divots, right? So, and they're all tailored based off of H2F. So it's all competencies and aspects that are going to help you in your career. So
I did not know that.
I could give you the link. You can also
we'll put it.
You could search Melissa Aguirre on divots and they'll all come up.
Okay.
But so that's like an easy place. And for leadership, if you're looking for something to use with your soldiers, that's what we do with 232 is you put on the yoga class on the projector and they can do the yoga. Like I don't necessarily need to be there. It's about the experience the soldiers and the individuals are having with these practices. I would also say go on your own self-exploration with this. There is no right or wrong to the journey of it. Because if you just want to get into reading some books or to just begin, you're going to find there's things you're not going to like. And it's like physical training or fitness. Like there's some things you're going to like and then some things you're not. If you don't like something, then don't do it. Don't go find something a little different with it. So where to begin? I find that a lot of people start this stuff when they're in crisis mode because they're grasping for solutions or they're dealing with chronic pain and they were recommended to start trying this. That's why I think the divots classes are really great because there's literally yoga for pain management on there. So there's actual classes. But I think that let your curiosity roam and search podcasts on this topic and learn more about it. But even just in your day-to-day life, notice when you're not breathing. So just start to pay attention. If we move out of I got to fix all these problems and we just move into I want to be curious, because this is part of it is like we will jump to I have these stress issues, I have these problems in my marriage, I have all these things, I need to fix it. Right? That's a program. And when we this train thing of it's wrong to have problems. We're human. We are not perfect. But if we start to get curious about our edges and our problems and our struggles, why am I struggling with my leadership? Why does that bug me? Or why does that thing my spouse does make me feel? What is that making me feel? It's making me feel not seen. Just getting curious about our mental, emotional challenges begins to open the door of options and opportunities that we can start to either communicate or there might be a proper practice or something you find just by Googling that can support you in that. But like I said earlier, when we are so reactive of, that's a problem equals bad, I need to either disassociate or solve and fix, both bypass what you're really being invited into. Every challenge is an invitation. It's an invitation for us to level up in our personal development. It's an invitation for us to learn to relate to one another a little deeper. But we've been told that it's bad and wrong to be human. And what the gift of this stuff is it brings our agency back, that I don't have to perform or, be disembodied in this way, but I get to connect back into my strengths, my process, my journey, and reconcile that, And I think that we need that in our culture,
No, I love the curious, and I love, kind of the mindset of every, challenge is an opportunity or invitation, as you put it. So I love that. You touched on breath work, and so are there any breath patterns or anything you recommend kind of, again, for the beginner? I know there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I think that just a big breath in and sigh it out it's an easy way to diffuse built up nervous energy and tension in the body, and it feels good. That's something else when we do things that actually feel good for our body, which this is so, contrary to what we've been socialized in the military. But when you do things that feel good in your body, you derail painful pathways because you're creating pleasurable neuromuscular pathways in your body. This is a way for us to befriend our human weapon system, for us to befriend the body and learn to utilize it in effective ways versus being disconnected. So a big breath in and sigh out, it can just feel good. And that's okay. Lean into the things that feel good for your body. And another one of my favorites is 4-part breath, where you inhale for 4. So inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, exhale. So you just visualize this 4-part breath. and you follow that, that's a really great way to neutralize your nervous system.
So if I got a big talk, I'm going to, before I get on stage, you thinking 4-part breath, or is that what?
Oh yeah, it'll help clear the mind. But for a lot of people, if you're new, it might feel following your breath can be really intimidating. Part of that is because we're disconnected from our bodies. So another great thing, you can interlace your fingers and just do this with your wrist and big breath in and sigh it out. And that's a way, I'm really big on how do we, feels really nice, especially if you write a lot.
Yeah.
Or even using, so in training, I do a lot of breath-centric training. So this is where we use the breath to initiate movement. So inhale, open, exhale, close, and just let the breath initiate that. Like in physical training, what I'll do is we'll take drills and we'll connect breath-centric repetition, because that's going to train you to build a relationship with your breath. Most of us don't have that, so that's why it's hard just to sit and breathe. But you could just do this with your hands. I think about, like with kids too, I do this with my daughter, where it's like inhale big, exhale, and just doing these things that get the body to reconnect with your breath. And then in time, you're going to have a lot more breath control.
Love it. Have you done any work, because I know you've been doing it with a decade, so you might have, because it just hit me. Have you done anything like with marksmanship? Have you ever went over to the range? And,
big time. I'm actually really passionate about this. That's so funny. Yes. Because especially with weapons qualification and training.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
To down regulate before, and then when you fire with your breath, because a lot of times too, like with the kickback, a lot of people aren't prepared for that, or they like force their bodies forward to, like, because they're over preparing for it. So when you're able to soften, that's going to help also with accuracy. And I think too is the gift of training and body awareness with your relationship with your weapon. Because I joke and laugh because I remember the rifle, the prayer, or like this is my rifle.
Oh yeah, they may like it, but this one is mine. Yeah, yeah.
Like this concept of our oneness and connection with our weapon. I mean, that's proprioceptive awareness. That's feeling connected with it naturally. So when you're at the range in your training and we do exercises to move with it, it becomes, and with your breath and all these things applied, that's how, like when I go train at the range, I'm really big on different drills and different movements with my breath, because if I'm in a situation where someone comes in my home, now it's default on how I move with my weapon. So I also look at the relationship of how we're in relationship with the weapon and how that is in my body, how that feels in my body, and then when I'm ready to fire, how my breath is. So because a lot of times people don't really, they just go to the range, fire, 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 and then go home.
Right.
But if like actual tactical training is so effective because you're building neural patterns with your weapon. So when you're in a high stress situation, which that, executive functioning is going to be offline, you're going to be depending on your nervous system and the patterns you've instilled to be effective. And I'm really big on, I actually am very passionate about this and sometimes do women's groups and different things. So yeah, so
we'll
relevant.
have to dig. They almost know it's like marksmanship yoga or whatever like
I
that.
call it mindful marksmanship.
Mindful marksmanship. I love it. I'll have to.
Yeah. I'm still, I dream that eventually I can get invited to help train at the range for the Army, but that hasn't happened yet. But in the civilian world, I do.
Yeah, no, I would be curious. Maybe to see. It would be almost like a study, like using the engagement skills trainer here. It would be fun to see, because my hypothesis would be if you did breath work right before those, especially new soldiers who don't know how to breathe, et cetera, go up to the line and fire, you're probably going to see improvement, because that's like you said, so many people don't understand the breath component of marksmanship. So.
You got to be in your body, especially, and I think this is why yoga, even just a 10-15 minute practice, because again, like I said, if people are disconnected from their body and we just go, hey, we're going to do this breathing exercise, I mean, most people hearing this are probably going to relate. Like a lot of people will say, yeah, I want to do breathing, but then they start and it's like, this feels so weird and I don't know. Well, that's because we're not connected to that. But the yoga practices, these techniques actually train that integration. So if you do a little practice before you go to the range, or just some breath-centric movement, it actually gets you back in your body. So when you train and fire and do different drills with the rifle, it's a lot easier to navigate your body because you're already in it.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love the connection to marksmanship. So, kind of bringing it back and putting it together is, again, for the listeners who want to get started down this pathway, we know you got the videos on divots. Are there any specific books or specific videos that you recommend?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. So I own a school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have an incredible reading list. So I could just give so many different book options. But I think if you're looking for lifestyle stuff, to read The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele, it'll blow your mind. It's so profound and life-changing. I also think if you're interested in the science and research and benefits of mindfulness and meditation, to read Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think those are good places to start to kind of get into this stuff. So with my partnership with the USO, we still have our foundations course, and I opened it up to the military community. So people can go to my website, melmarieyoga.com, or they could go to Mill Mind Body, so like military, millmindbody.com, either one. And you can either request for it or just put in, and then I'll send you the link and all that stuff to begin. That's a 52-hour free program on yoga and all this stuff. So,
that is so awesome.
Yeah. And, we do, like, my CAA for military spouses covers tuition for my training programs. I'm working with a few things to help get whether the school and Army cool and different things, because a lot of people are interested in these trainings. It's just the education resource. Like, I can give a discount, and I do, for military community, but we are in the process of supporting so people can have full ride scholarships to learn how to train this stuff. So
that is so awesome.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, hey, if you're listening to this, and I'll put the links on there and definitely share. I mean, the 52-hour free course.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you wouldn't do that if you're interested and you want to get better. Where can folks find you?
So you can connect with me on Instagram at melmarieyoga. It's a blend of my life and my yoga, and then my work with the military on there. So at melmarieyoga, and of course melmarieyoga.com. My email is melmarieyoga@gmail.com. So they can contact me through there. There's a lot of, I love helping connect people with resources. There's a lot of nonprofits and different things that can help people in their personal life. And then I fulfill unit requests. I advise and support. So if there are leadership or units, it doesn't matter where you are in the country, who are interested in this kind of stuff, I'm always open for conversations and continuing this mission forward. This is something that it's hilarious because it's so full circle of being 19 years old when I started this journey, young, like my husband just joined the military, he goes on his deployment, coming back and wanting to bring this, and seeing the interest from 2011 to now where we're at with this. It's clear the metrics are screaming for this stuff. We are at a place with stress issues and health issues that, it's like, what else do we have to offer? But this is all internal stuff. Like, it's so cost effective. And I think a big piece of it is just education and socializing it. So however I can support that mission, I'm available for anybody to reach out to.
Oh, Melissa, thanks so much. Really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate everything you're doing and the passion with it. And I'll say, hey, I'm guilty of one of those individuals of, I never really thought about mindfulness. Like, it was never on my radar, because kind of like you said, it was always this squishy thing that I didn't really understand. But just having this conversation with you today, and our previous conversations, like, so many light bulbs are going off, and I love how you make it accessible, to people in terms of who maybe, had never considered yoga before, never considered this as a way of a tool to kind of use for human performance. So I appreciate that.
Well, of course, and I think that part of it is because people feel they're not mobile or flexible. I see this with a lot of people who train in the gym. They're like, we're so strong, but there's no mobility, and that intimidation of doing this. But I always say it's not about flexibility. It's just optimizing range of motion, and not just range of motion of your body, but range of motion of your mind. And when we look at the different ways that it's not about performance, you don't have to look pretty doing it. That's not what it's about, or that you need to touch your toes. It's about maintenance. It's about regulation. And then all the physical stuff comes later.
No, love it. Hey, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having
doing
me.
your
This
time.
is great.
Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. Hope you took notes. We'll put some of the links on there that Melissa talked about. You got to take advantage of her 52-hour course. But thanks again for listening.
Yeah.